Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first semester review of biology. So, when biology first gets going, one of the first topics we get into is some of the biochemistry. And as I always like to joke, you haven't been taught chemistry until you've had a biologist teach you chemistry. So, with that said, let me show you a few things here. So, remember your hydrophilic and hydrophobic. So, the oil tries to mix up, but after a moment or two, what happens? It goes back to the top. And that's what you see there. It starts to separate because the oil will not go into solution the way the dye does. So what did we say? Water, of course, is the universal solvent. And what else do we have here? We learned a lot about carbon. Carbon, of course, can make 4 bonds. So what you see here is propane. And all those little ones are the hydrogens. So what do I always say? Propane looks a lot like a poodle. And this here is isopropyl alcohol. And the big blue one is oxygen. Of course, you see your 3 carbons and all those hydrogens. And I always like to joke for you Trekkies out there that isopropyl looks a lot like a Klingon bird of prey. Bam. And then we learned about prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So of course, prokaryotes are bacteria, and you'll notice I covered up the kiddos' names just because. One of the projects I used to do back in the day before COVID struck was have the guys do a cell model or some kind of cell project. So this is cool. This is cool. A little board game with all of your organelles and whatnot on there, and that leads us to other eukaryotes. So you have all those things like the mitochondria where your cellular respiration takes place, and the ER, with, of course, ER is carrying your chemicals and proteins and whatnot, and you have the ribosomes for protein synthesis. And where is the DNA? And none other than the nucleus. So these are animals, really, eukaryotic animal cells. Then we have a plant cell. Of course, plants have the central vacuole, which stores water, and the chloroplasts, which are responsible for photosynthesis. And then you have the rigid cell wall. Okay, now this is kind of cool. This is a specialized type of cell called a neuron with the long axon and the little projections at the top called dendrites. And one of the things we learned is that neurons take part in a special type of active transport by using sodium-potassium pumps. Sodium and potassium. So hopefully that rings a bell, and hopefully that reminds you a thing or two about ions. Remember ions? Ions are charged particles. Let's Blair Witch it along. Then we have those lovely DNA models. I used to have guys do this back in the day before COVID struck. So let's see, A and G, remember Aggies, AG, Aggies are big, okay? Taco Cabana, TC, those are your purines and pyrimidines. So A binds with T, G binds with C, but A and G are bigger. So this guy here, you'll notice that like, part of his rung of the ladder is big and part of it is small. So he did a nice job of showing you purines and pyrimidines. This one, not quite as well, but it's big, so that makes it cool. Heredity, so we learned a lot about Mendel, right? Let's see here, genetic technology. This is a gel electrophoresis. We've been taught about that a lot. That's where like at crime scenes where they could put the DNA in there and it'll tell you if it matches up with the suspect. Of course, the only time DNA matches up with someone else is if it is an identical twin. And hopefully you remember what a conjoined twin is. A conjoined or Siamese twin is an identical twin that never really fully separated, okay? Then we learned about my girl Rachel Carson. She taught us about pesticides, how they don't just affect wildlife like birds, hence the name Silent Spring, but pesticides and other chemicals are also capable of being carcinogenic. That means they can cause mutations in your cells, mutations that lead to cancer. So that was Rachel Carson's great contribution to biology and ultimately environmental science. This book perhaps is what's the catalyst for the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. Then we have other little terms like in terms of genetic engineering, you can put in other genes into new organisms by ligase. That's why my stapler in my tape has the little stupid term ligase on there. But how do you cut genes out with other special enzymes called restriction enzymes? Okay, so cutting, restriction, gluing back in, or in this case tape and staple, would be ligase. So why is genetic engineering important? For a lot of reasons, but one of the examples we covered in class would be having E. coli bacteria. Yes, nasty E. coli bacteria, but you can stick in, stick with like ligase, you can stick in the human gene for insulin, so you have efficient insulin being made that is human. Okay, how cool is that? And let's see here. Oh yeah, you'll notice the terms ligase that ends with the suffix ase. So most enzymes that we will ever cover in this class end in the suffix ase. In this case, ligase, reverse transcriptase, DNA polymerase, etc., etc., etc. Finally, we get to a little evolution here. Darwin, and of course he was on that boat called the Beagle. He landed on the Galapagos. He taught about finches and marine iguanas and adaptation. And of course that buzzword is natural selection. In other words, you have the right tool at the right place at the right time, or we could even reword that further. You live long enough to pass on your genes, and it's these successful genes that get passed along. Of course, other things have gone extinct. So here I have a mixed bag of my favorite fossils. Yes, these are all real fossils. Things like Megalodon. Yes, that is Megalodon. The darn thing got to be like 60 feet long. You could drive a car through it. As I told you guys at the Texas State Aquarium in Corpus, my entire family of 5 walked through the jaws. It was amazing. That's a polychaete tube worm. Trilobites, remember we said trilobites 250 million years ago, they were everywhere, and then bam, they went extinct. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Let's see, more trilobites. I got a whole little mixed bag here. I think it's all really cool stuff. Moving on. Yes, this is a woolly mammoth. Maybe this doesn't really make you feel a whole lot of what's going on here, but in comparison, this is a cow femur. That's a woolly mammoth femur. Any questions? All right. I've got a whole mixed bag of bivalves and gastropod fossils. These were all found in the Texas Hill Country. So that kind of gets to the point that at one point, this was obviously all underwater. And before I forget, we did cover pedigrees. So let's see, this is for Dimples. This kiddo did a heck of a job. And of course, the one right here is him. So you get to see the different traits. Who has dimples, who doesn't, male, female. This one here, this kiddo also included, to the best of his ability, the genotype. So you see where it says mom, big B, little b. In other words, she would be heterozygous. And there's a key. That's a pretty good job. I don't care if you're in high school, college, or whatever. That's pretty awesome. Moving on. There is my ammonite. Ammonites, that's a cool fossil. One of my highlights was hiking at Seminole Canyon, and we found a big, huge ammonite that was probably about the size of a soccer ball. It was big. So ammonites are extinct. Their relatives, the nautiluses, live on. So during that mass extinction event, these guys are believed to have been closer to the surface. That was their niche, right? And in other words, they were exposed to the extinction event, whereas these guys live further down. They were buffered or protected. Okay, let's kind of move along a little bit here. Okay, as far as evolution goes, there were some other buzzwords like camouflage. There's a phasmid. You can see it looks like a leaf. Eye spots. You know, I've joked in class, you're not a real man until you catch a 30-inch redfish. Well, haha. Redfish have eye spots. So do swallowtails. So the front of the animal, front of the insect rather, is up here, right? But birds, they're targeting the wrong end. So those eye spots are to kind of fool you. That's why I said farmers in India wear masks on the back of their heads so that tigers get confused as well. And then we have mimicry. So this is a coral snake. So you all know the dumb little saying, especially in South Texas, you know, red touch yellow, kill a fellow, right? Red touch black, ooh, friend the jack. So the different color patterns of a milk snake mimic, hence mimicry, mimic those of the coral snake. And one of the things we've talked about is who who are the milk snakes trying to avoid? Why do they even have colors that resemble a coral snake? And we've said mammals typically don't see in color. So as primates, specifically as humans, we don't see in, or we're kind of the exception rather. We do see in color, but whether you're a dog or a cat or some other animal, color is not that big of a deal because by their evolution they are typically nocturnal. So the milk snake is really trying to avoid predatory birds. Maybe it's a crow or a raven or a hawk even, or a roadrunner, roadrunners as well. Speaking of other shells I found in Texas, hill country, this is one of the bivalves rather that I mentioned earlier, which again shows you this was entirely underwater. Now these two fossils, as cool as they are, these are replicas. So there you have the Archaeopteryx. We talked about Thomas Huxley a little bit, who was all in favor of Archaeopteryx, that transitionary species where it is a dinosaur. It had teeth, but it's also a bird. So it's that kind of transition there. So that's the replica of Archaeopteryx. And then here's another cool one. This is a replica of Mesosaurus. So Mesosaurus fossils were found in South America and also in Africa. And that kind of gets into the whole point of things like continental drift and, of course, Pangea. Now, getting along with other terms affiliated with microevolution, here you have mallards. That's a male, the mariachi male back there and his mate. That's sexual dimorphism. That means you can tell the difference between male and female. And of course, every species of bird, or almost every species of bird, has their own unique dance. Yeah, I said they dance, okay, like birds of paradise. So mallards are no exception to that. So this male mallard has not just his own color pattern that's specific to mallards, but his own dance. So the way he moves and dances would be different than wood ducks and other species. So this female here would be interested in not just his color, but his own dance. So we're getting into terms like behavioral isolation, and like I said a moment ago, sexual dimorphism. And speaking of sexual dimorphism, there's a rooster. He has a rooster comb. That's this up here. Females don't have that. So that's where you can tell the difference of male and female pretty easily. And there is a bobwhite quail. Kind of the same thing. The females do not have the white patches on their head the way the male would. So I said with birds are pretty civil when they're trying to mate. They have dance-offs, okay? It's called a lek or a dance-off, right? Mammals, on the other hand, grow antlers or horns. In many cases, they fight. But the shape of their antlers or horns is very unique to their species as well. So just like how color is unique to birds, the shape of their antlers, like the way a bighorn hits and fights is going to be different than maybe in other species around the world, like impalas and other gazelles, or closer to home, things like white-tailed deer. So the shape of the antlers, grind a certain way. So if you ever look at white-tail antlers compared to things like axis deer or even mule deer, their antler shapes are a little bit different. So the way they would fight, in this case, the way the males would fight would impress females in a certain way. I'm almost done. One other term we covered was convergent evolution. So that's when two unrelated species look pretty similar because they evolved in similar habitats. So here is a prickly pear cactus, which is found in the deserts of the southwestern United States, including Texas and adjacent Mexico. There you have an aloe vera, which is found in Africa. So they have similar features. They can prick you a little bit. You see what I'm saying? They have little things, little thorns, right? They are also succulents, so they store water, but they're not related. They're not related. So this is actually closer related to things like lilies, okay? And that's a dicot. It's a completely different classification of plant. So there you have it, guys. That was just about everything in a nutshell for the first semester of biology. Starting next semester, we'll get into human origins a little bit. How cool is that? And then we'll get into my favorite topic, which is ecology. But for all the haters out there who said, COVID would slow us down, little do they know we start a YouTube channel and make this happen. So guys, I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, you have been a blessing. This is Mr. Bentley signing off. Peace out, guys. God bless.